Have you ever stopped to think about what happens to a referee after the game ends? When the stadium empties out and the cameras shut off, all that's left is silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. But it doesn't always last. Sometimes, it's broken by threats, insults, and hate messages. Referees aren't just the judges of the game, they're targets. Targets of angry fans, frustrated players, and overwhelming pressure. The cost of one wrong decision can be the end of a career, and in some cases, even the end of a life. Today, you're going to uncover the harsh psychological reality faced by referees. The burden of carrying an entire game on their shoulders. The constant fear of making a mistake. The digital lynching that destroys reputations. And the emotional exhaustion that pushes many to the edge. And in the end, one brutal question that few dare to ask. When the weight becomes unbearable, how long can a referee hold on? A poorly awarded penalty. A missed offside call. A controversial red card. It takes just one mistake. Just one. If a player misses a goal, they get another shot. If a coach makes a bad substitution, there's always the next match. But for a referee, one mistake can destroy their credibility forever. Football doesn't forgive. And fans never forget. There have been referees demoted after a single bad call in a crucial match. Others were simply never allowed to officiate a major game again. And this doesn't just happen in professional football. In youth leagues, amateur tournaments, even local neighborhood games, the psychological pressure is relentless. So the question remains, how does anyone carry that emotional burden day after day? Now imagine this. You're standing on the field, surrounded by yelling players, furious fans, and coaches staring at you with rage. You've got just a split second to make a decision that could change the outcome of the game. The fear of making a mistake is paralyzing. It makes referees doubt themselves. Some step onto the pitch with a pounding heart and cold sweat. The anxiety before a game can be so intense that many lose sleep the night before. The result? Insecure, hesitant officiating. And ironically, the fear of being wrong only increases the chances of being wrong. It's a vicious, destructive cycle. Many referees say they feel a crushing sense of anxiety before every match. They know that no matter what call they make, someone will be unhappy. That psychological weight follows them off the pitch and into their personal lives. And when a mistake does happen, the consequences go far beyond the game. Media pressure, social media abuse, and even criticism from within their own federation can make referees carry guilt for weeks or even months. Some become so afraid that they start avoiding big calls altogether, hoping the VAR or assistant refs will take the responsibility instead. In the end, refereeing becomes a burden, and the love for football turns into a nightmare. When a referee makes a fair decision that hurts one team, they immediately become the enemy. Impartiality in football often isn't respected, it's hated. If a ref gives a penalty against the home team, he's a thief. If he sends off a fan-favorite player, he's corrupt. If he strictly follows the rules, he's a heartless robot. No matter what he does, someone will always hate him. And worst of all, many fans can't separate the referee from the human being behind the uniform. That's when the real harassment begins. Referees have reported being cursed at in supermarkets, having their kids bullied at school, and even receiving death threats through anonymous messages. The impartiality that should be a cornerstone of the game becomes a reason for hate. And it's not just fans fueling this culture of intolerance. Clubs, team officials, and even sports commentators contribute to the toxic atmosphere by pointing fingers at referees as the villains behind defeats. Football has become a battlefield, and referees are always caught in the crossfire. The cruel irony. A referee is not allowed to cheer for a team. Not allowed to celebrate a great play. Not allowed to show any emotion. They must remain neutral. But the football world refuses to accept that neutrality. Before the internet, referees were only criticized in stadiums or post-game shows. Now, the hate has spilled over into their private lives. One controversial decision is all it takes, and suddenly their name is trending on Twitter. Fake accounts are created to spread lies. Hate messages flood their DMs. And too often, those threats become real. There have been cases where referees had their home addresses leaked online, putting their own safety and their family's safety at risk. This leads to anxiety, sleepless nights, and in many cases, full-blown panic attacks. And it doesn't stop. Digital lynching never ends. A mistake from years ago can resurface every time that referee is assigned a big game. The label of incompetent or corrupt sticks like glue. For many, social media has become a war zone. Referees have to delete comments, block users, restrict who can view their profiles. Some even quit social media completely, just to protect their mental health. But the issue runs deeper. What if referees are starting to make mistakes not because they're unqualified, but because they're afraid? Many step onto the pitch terrified of what might happen after the final whistle. They try to be perfect to avoid more abuse. But in football, perfection doesn't exist. And the harder they try to please everyone, the more they become targets. Being a referee isn't just about blowing a whistle. It's about studying rulebooks, staying physically prepared, and dealing with constant psychological pressure. All of that comes at a cost: mental exhaustion. Burnout syndrome has become increasingly common among referees. Many simply can't take the emotional weight anymore and walk away from their careers. The exhaustion doesn't come just from the games, but from everything surrounding them. The intense demands from federations, the grueling training routines, the lack of recognition, and the constant fear of making a mistake all turn refereeing into an unsustainable burden. Many referees develop symptoms of chronic anxiety, insomnia, and even panic attacks before decisive matches. Football, which should be a passion, becomes a toxic and unbearable environment. And the worst part? There is no structured psychological support for these professionals. Most referees are left to deal with the pressure alone, with nowhere to turn. For many, the only way out is to hang up the whistle and try to rebuild their lives far from the sport they once loved. The hatred toward referees has crossed all boundaries. In smaller leagues, it's not uncommon for referees to be physically assaulted by players and fans. There have been cases where referees were beaten, hospitalized, even killed. The most terrifying part? Many of these attacks happen in front of hundreds of people, and no one does a thing. There are videos online showing referees being chased across the field, surrounded by furious players, with fans storming the pitch to attack them. What should be a sport turns into a battleground. In amateur and youth leagues, where security is almost non-existent, the violence is even more brutal. Referees are assaulted simply because a team didn't like a call. Many walk away from the profession after being attacked, traumatized by the fear of returning to the field. And don't think this only happens in small games. Even in major international tournaments, referees have been threatened and chased, requiring police escorts just to leave the stadium. The message is clear: in football, the ones who make the decisions are always in danger. But the real question is, how long will this be normalized? How long will referees have to risk their physical safety just for doing their jobs? This is the darkest part of all. Some referees simply can't take it anymore. The weight of the pressure, the constant hatred, the isolation, it leads to the worst possible outcome. Cases of referees who have taken their own lives aren't widely reported, but they exist. And they prove that football urgently needs to talk about the mental health of referees. One of the most shocking cases was that of German referee Babak Rafati, who attempted suicide in 2011 just hours before officiating a Bundesliga match. He was found in his hotel room after years of struggling with pressure and severe depression. Thankfully, he survived, and today he speaks openly about the importance of mental health for referees. Another tragic case was John C. McCabe, a Scottish referee who died by suicide in 2021 after facing intense pressure and backlash over his on-field decisions. He became a target of online hate, and the emotional burden became too much. These are just a few examples. How many other referees are suffering in silence? How many more will have to reach this breaking point before football starts protecting the mental health of its officials? The reality is harsh. Behind the whistle, there are lives being destroyed. And far too often, the end is irreversible. The truth is, no one walks onto a football pitch hoping to be hated. But referees live that reality every single day. It's time for the football world to understand that referees are human beings. Yes, they make mistakes, but they also hurt. Behind the uniform, there's someone who feels, who fears, and who's doing their best to keep going. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. And there's another powerful video right here on the screen that I know you'll want to watch. Click it now, and I'll see you there.